So, welcome on this Saturday to an episode, a chat of Mental Health Matters. I'm Fairy Godmother Tamara Angela, and today I'm bringing another friend with me on to chat. I'm going to let her do her intro because I'm not as snazzy with the intros as I would like to be. But, I just want to, we're going to be talking this month of November about just how to navigate that holiday, what I call the holiday corridor. It's that period of time between Halloween all the way up until Valentine's Day. It's like just back to back with celebrations and gatherings and get-togethers, and the idea that you need to spend money. And so that creates a lot of undue stress for people. So I wanted us to be able to just kind of chat about that and gain some perspective on things that you can do to better navigate that period of time. So, Brittany, I want you to just give us a little intro. Tell us your social media and everything straight off the top so people can start out by checking you out and following you while we're having our discussion.
Cool. So I'm Brittany McCullar. I'm a licensed professional counselor. On Facebook, I am Ifakimi McCullar. On Instagram, the Hoodoo Therapist.
Yay. So, Mental Health Matters, I like to bring other wellness experts to conversation with me. Because those of you who've been following me, I was doing the podcast for a little while, and most of that was audio, but kind of switching platforms. I wanted to go back to a space of having other folks on here to just kind of discuss things with me. So we're going to have other wellness professionals joining us. But Brittany and I talk about a lot of things where the mental health world is concerned, but we also talk about things on a spiritual level because both of us work at the integration of the 1,000 degrees and certifications that we have.
I call it the merge.
I like that. I'm going to keep that. and using those spiritual gifts. So as I started off, you got October, Mariah Carey is thawing out. You know, she's defrosting, and then November 1st, she's ready to go. And it was interesting because like this year, I think maybe a little bit more this year than last year, but I started seeing people put up their Christmas decorations along with the Halloween decorations.
It was really
so there
interesting.
were like Christmas lights with the Halloween decorations, which was quite joyous. I don't know. I enjoyed it. And what I think I saw some Christmas stuff out like the beginning of October at some of like the craft stores and stuff like that. So there's this jump on the holidays and putting things. I mean, back in the day, our moms used to put stuff on layaway, you know, super
Absolutely.
early. But just talking about like where that stress starts, and it's interesting because that stress starts for people right around daylight savings time ending, which gives us less sunlight. You know, the kids have gone back to school, things are kind of going into hibernation. So for you, like with your clients and the work that you've done, what has that looked like for you and with the clients that you're working with? Like, what are some of the things that they're coming to you discussing?
So during the day, I work in community mental health in more of a rural area. Lots of concerns around this time, grief, of course. I would say that maybe that's like the number one thing is grief. So we work through grief, work through some seasonal depression.
Yeah, talk about that grief a little bit because that's That's a huge one.
Mhm.
That splits up families, when big mama is gone, when the matriarch is gone, or maybe, when dad is gone, people just don't gather or come together as much anymore, or either they don't at all or they don't know how to. It's not as joyous. Talk about like some of the concern, like, can you share some of the concerns and things like that clients generally have?
Of course. So there's like the emotional part of the grief, but then there's also kind of like the background, family structure, logistics, organization. Because if Big Mom organized everything, for them, and no one
Yeah.
really had to do anything, no one really had to bring anything. It's kind of like, how do they organize? How do they get it together? And so sometimes I've learned that that is a big struggle for people. Um, I would also say family dysfunction,
Mm,
because at the root and at the underlying that is coming, some of the underlying reasons, right, is the
yeah.
dysfunction. So you already had the dysfunction. Now you have the grief, lack of coping skills, lack of support system, and so it's a lot of layers to it. But
Yeah.
primarily that grief, and I would say that family dysfunction kind of being like the underlying thing.
Totally. Because several years ago, I was like, I'm not working during, Thanksgiving, especially because, like, at one point, Thanksgiving was, I built my schedule around the kids' schedule a lot for certain things. And so when they have longer breaks, then I got to kind of reconfigure a bit. And for Thanksgiving, it used to be that they were just off
Mhm.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then they started being off for the whole week.
Or a week and
And
a half,
so
2 weeks.
Christmas now is 2.5 weeks, which is like, I'm wondering if they're going towards year-round school at this point. Like they have to be because it's so extended,
They've been pushing for it for a while.
which I'm not against like at all. But I would have these clients that they were like, I would just say, you know what, I'm not, I'm not working this week. I'm gonna focus my time with the kids and things like that. And the next thing you know, I remember one year I had clients texting me during their Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? And they were just like, I'm falling apart. I thought I was able to do this. There was this space of reactivity. Definitely, I thought I had proactively helped some clients get through some things, but then I realized that they get there and it's like, boom, I'm triggered, right?
Hmm.
And the reality was, it's like, when you really look at it, so you got everything you're talking about with, it's like, if Big Mama was the one that planned everything and organized everything, and all you had to do was show up with some lemonade, you're not thinking about how to plan stuff. You've never cooked a turkey. You've never done any of those big things that make it feel like home, right? And then you've got the family dysfunction where I think we make jokes about the black sheep, or we make jokes about the auntie who only shows up for a little bit, but that's a real thing
Hmm.
because there's a reason
Hmm.
why that person has alienated themselves, or they're choosing not to show up. They could be traveling, they could be working, but they're choosing not to come back, right? And so then I see those posts that are just like, you know, you never know how long this person has. You should make sure you make peace, and that's so
Mm.
toxic.
Mm-mm. And that's a lot of the problem sometimes is we sit around people that see, sometimes they don't even like, Aunt so and so, Uncle so and so, and a whole bunch of issues that haven't been addressed, and people want them to, like make peace. with a whole bunch of stuff instead of setting boundaries or
Mm,
learning, developing your own holiday traditions. If you have children, you can develop your own traditions. You can see family, you can put a time limit on it. Hey, we only stand 30 minutes, then we out. It's really nothing wrong with that.
yeah. Yeah. I think it's just these unwritten rules that are just
Mm-hmm.
like, 'cause I was talking to one person and I said a couple years ago I didn't have the kids for they were with their dad for Christmas, and they would be there. I think it like cuz Christmas or something like that was like on a weekend. So I did my stuff on Christmas Eve. And then
Mm-hmm.
my son's birthday is the 21st. Mine is the 26th. So I think I had done all of our stuff on like Christmas Eve, and we had been celebrating pretty much like straight from his birthday
Mm-hmm.
straight through. And so then they went with their dad, and I had another girlfriend whose her kids were with their dad. So we went out of town to actually visit some other family that she had. We took a little road trip or whatever, and ate out at a restaurant. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, like everybody's not Christian, or some people have
Right.
already they've already had a holiday at a certain time, or they don't have people at home, or whatever it is. And from that time I started telling my dad and my aunt, I was like, I'm burned out from cooking. I used
Mm-hmm.
to, when I was married, I would like, our house is where everybody would come, and I would be cooking for 2 or 3 days. There was like a big spread, the homemade cakes, and just I prided myself on doing stuff like that. But I'm burned out, and I don't feel like doing it anymore. I want a house hop. And I remember telling my aunt, I said, well, we could just like order something, and it was just kind of like, and I was like, you know, it's gonna be all right. And I remember that first year we ordered food, and then after that, she was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're gonna do this from now on because don't nobody feel like cleaning up,
It
and
really only takes one time to eat out for
one time.
Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's really wonderful. To just do
It's so
nothing.
nice because you get to
Mhm.
actually like relax and do stuff. Like we went out for, I think it was Easter, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna go out to eat for Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
But we'll order in probably for Christmas. Um, but yeah, it was like overcoming some of that because the family size is smaller now. We're not celebrating with like a big amount of folks. People are doing
Mhm.
stuff. And I was just like, I don't feel like doing all of that. So there's this piece in there where we've got to kind of deconstruct what we like, the why. It's like the only way to celebrate the holiday isn't by going over Big Mama's house and stressing everybody out by cooking.
Mhm.
Like, because people say, well,
You're
it's not
stressing yourself
Thanksgiving
out.
until, yeah, stressing yourself out. It's like, it is Thanksgiving if there's no homemade macaroni on the table. Like, you can get the macaroni from somewhere, or you could just make a side of macaroni if you really got to have it.
Mhm.
Like, it's still Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's like what you're saying, like all of these like little unwritten rules and like smaller traditions. It can potentially put a strain on you.
Yeah, just like building up and creating, because that's the space where I think we kind of create the
Mhm.
stress for ourselves and say, well, it has to be this or it has to be that.
Mm-mm.
And in actuality, it has to be whatever your tradition is.
It can be whatever you want. And that's what I used to tell people when I used to work for the crisis line. I have
Mm,
spent some holidays in the past working the crisis line, National Suicide Hotline. And that's what I used to tell people, like, you don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go for the holidays. You don't
yeah,
have to fake spend time with people that you barely like.
right.
You just don't have to. You can do what you want to do.
Let's talk a little bit about that family dysfunction piece because that's a huge piece. I would have, because you have aging elders,
Hmm.
um, and they're typically like, oh, I'm getting older. I would love to see. you get married, or I'm getting older, I would love to see you have
Mm-mm.
kids, or I'm getting older and I would love it for you and your cousin to be cool again. Meanwhile, cousin is a whole menace,
Mm-hmm.
whole entire menace, and has been an open menace that everybody knows. Don't nobody fool with the cousin, but you got to be the one to make sure to make
Mm-mm.
peace.
Nope. Nope.
No.
Mm-mm.
So let's talk a little bit about that family dysfunction, because I think that's a huge one that makes people stressed out, because during the year while you're busy, you can kind of just be like, oh, I'm busy, my schedule doesn't allow. You can kind of pick and choose. I think people feel freedom in picking and choosing how they show up then, versus feeling kind of obligated to show up for a period of time for the holidays, and then having to, it's like, oh, I know that cousin is going to be there because big mama always invites them. And people haven't let go of, I don't know, an argument that you guys had when you were 12 and you guys are just moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are the stuff that come up. Or I know women will go in and be like, I don't want to talk about why I don't feel like having kids.
Or why I'm not married yet.
Right.
And people don't have to. They can set boundaries. They can say, "Oh, I'm not talking about that today. Um, I don't want children. I have children when I'm ready." But I think these are things that maybe people don't think about, like, in that time.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess depending on the family, kind of is like what's appropriate, what's not socially appropriate in their family. Is keeping peace more important and just kind of like holding things in and being miserable?
Yeah.
What does that
And
family
just figuring
value?
out the way to say it. Like, it doesn't mean that
Mhm.
you got to be snippy and snappy, but how can you just kind of practice saying, you know what, today, because this may not be a question that they ask all the time. And then it's like you get to Thanksgiving dinner and over the dinner rolls, they're like, why haven't you had kids? Like, they may
Mhm.
choose to spring that stuff on
That's
you.
when they want to start, probably. Yeah.
Hmm. So
Mhm.
possibly even as a tip, start setting your boundaries beforehand.
And it's
These
not
are things.
disrespectful.
Yeah. I mean, and if you don't typically speak up for yourself the rest of the year, they're not gonna expect you to do that when they ambush you, because it's an ambush.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, when they
Mhm.
ambush you at Christmas dinner, it's like more of the same. So they're not expecting you to stand up for yourself at that time or anything. They're expecting, like, I'm just gonna, like, this is the same thing we always talk about.
They're not expecting you to stand up for yourself. They're not expecting to hear, no, I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want to do, whatever I'm being asked to do. People they just don't expect that. But I think just setting firm boundaries with families, and sometimes it doesn't always have to be like this hard, firm, like assertive thing. It can be, no, don't want to do that. Or no, I'm not having that conversation today. We can move
Mm-hmm.
to something else. It doesn't have to be, and people, we can't control, this is the other thing. We can't control how other people perceive or interpret what we say. So we can't control
Exactly.
everything, but we can control our responses to dysfunction, to, as you put it, the ambushing.
Yeah, and even just, is there a gentle way you can just, like, when they start that line of questioning, for example, in that example, where you can just, like, put an extra dinner roll on their plate and just gently pat them on the back and be like, all right, and then just change the subject.
Hmm.
Like, what are those subtle ways? I think at the heart of it, no matter what you choose to do, at the heart of it is advocating for yourself.
Hmm.
And I think that's difficult in families where you don't feel like you have a voice. If you don't feel like you have a voice, that's made you alienate, that's made you walk away. And so it's like, oh, it's going to be status quo when I get there again. Like, they're still not going to be
And this
listening.
is
So,
my question. This is my question. Do we get away from the work, the emotional work goes into being assertive or
Mm,
setting boundaries or saying no. Because you're right, like it might, sound, a certain type of way, or we can, do things in a more passive way. But do we, can we say we want these boundaries, but kind of get out of that emotional work that it takes to say, no, we're not talking about that today, or we ain't gonna start today,
yeah.
something.
Yeah, I think that escape is a lot easier, but out of sight, out of mind doesn't mean that anything has been adjusted or addressed.
Hmm.
It just means that you've walked away and you haven't had to examine it.
Hmm.
People don't understand, or they're not acknowledging that the stress that you feel when you go back into those family environments is the stress based on the fact that these things have not been addressed. They've not been changed. They've not
So
been
when
adjusted.
are we gonna address it?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to address it when you're just like, I'm going to go in here for 30 minutes and then I'm going to disappear and they're not
Hmm.
going to see me the rest of the year. That part is tempting. But it kind of it goes back to what you were talking about, where you were saying like, okay, I'm going to set this boundary. I'm going to go in and I'm going to sit here for 30 minutes. I'm going to allow 30 minutes
You
for
have
this.
to survive in that 30 minutes, though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But if you tell yourself that and you're like, okay, I'll stay for 45 if it's pretty good, right?
Hmm.
What have you done to prep yourself before you go in there? Like, what tools do you have going in? I like for people to kind of have like a pre-made script that they kind of have
Hmm.
rehearsed a bit, that they feel comfortable with, maybe like one or two variations of what could you say? How would you respond if this comes up? You know,
Hmm.
like having that pre-made script. Um, and also having done the work ahead of time, because like you said, we're not able to control what they do. You can do all the work in the world and still walk in and Big Mama is still gonna say what she say,
Hmm.
right?
But
And every
by doing
and
the work, are you gonna feel some type of way by standing your ground, by putting those boundaries in place and saying what you need to say, for that moment?
right, because then there's work afterwards, you know what I mean, to kind of process like what did that feel like
Hmm.
in that moment. um and also just even looking at like what other supports you may have at the house, do you have excuse me, an older sibling that's maybe been successful at setting boundaries? um do you have another sibling that's like, look, we're gonna go in here together, because she always asking both of us. You guys can kind of tag team and be there for one another.
Have your
Just
support in
kind of
place.
having your supports in place, um because these things are real, and typically they don't come from a malicious place. They don't. It just comes from a place of not having boundaries, and it comes from a place of, I think one thing that I talk with clients about is understanding what role you play in the family.
Hmm.
Your family's like
And
a
your
movie.
conflict style. Are you avoidant? Are you comfortable with talking about the difficult things?
Right, right, because our families are like, I see them like a TV show, like a movie. Like, you play a character and certain characters mesh and certain ones don't,
Hmm.
and there's always a storyline that's moving. But at some point, like, you can continue that same storyline. Like on The Young and the Restless, it's the same storyline
Hmm.
all day long. Sharon been crazy on Young and the
Been
Restless
the same
for
for the last 50 years.
years. Every once in a while they vary, but it goes back to the same thing. So there's a point at which that empowerment piece is you rewriting your storyline. But that doesn't mean that everybody else is going to go with that immediately and just be like, oh, she did something different. Okay, this is cool. Some people are going to be like, nah, I want to flip back. Like, why? I don't like this. This needs to go back the way I liked it. Like, this is funny. I don't like how they added this character. Same as how we watched, what happened on Power when 50 thought it was cute to go put Trey songs in there. We didn't ask for that.
We didn't
ask for that. Put Joe back. We need Joe.
But sometimes things are a little bit more difficult when you're trying to change things, so you can anticipate, some pushback. You can anticipate, and have those, like you said, a little rehearsal, for things. My thing is rehearse the pushback, practice that too. Some helpful lines or things that you can say.
Yeah. Some things, and just know that with this prep work, you can't anticipate everything. That's a discomfort for people. It's like, oh, we're role playing or we're anticipating certain things, and people want to go in as prepared as possible, but then they're just like, oh, I might freeze up if I don't have an exact answer. My goal in having people just kind of practice some of these things and anticipate some of these things is just so you have something that is in your toolkit that feels comfortable for you to say. We want it to feel authentic, and we want it to feel comfortable, and we want it to come from a confident place. So when you say it, people are like, they're gonna kind of side eye you a little bit, but it's been said. All that we're worried about is you actually putting it out there and letting it be said. Not necessarily that it's going to change the other person's behavior, but now they know this is where I have to meet her or him. This is where they are from this point on, and you continue to advocate for yourself from that point.
Yeah.
Excuse me, because it's difficult to go in and I remember Ricky. I think it was Ricky Smiley. I just know it was a morning show host, and this is a while ago. I remember, and I swear it was him. He was talking about family, and he said, especially with like siblings and cousins and stuff like that, he said it comes a point where you have to create friendships and create relationships with them because these are simply people that were birthed. You all were birthed in together. Like, you didn't have any choice.
In the same family, in the same.
Yeah, you didn't have any choice. That your brother or sister is your parents' other child. As you get older, you have to decide, do I even like them as a person?
And then we're going into the idea of building our own supports in our own community to have our own support systems as we grow. Because once you become an adult, the choice is yours.
Yeah, and I think so many people miss that, especially growing up. Like, if you grew up in a bigger family or things like that, they're like, oh, I didn't need to have friends. No, you actually do need to have friends, no matter how big the family is, because the folks in your family, they're there by proximity. You don't always get to choose, but at some point you have to choose to cultivate that relationship. You have to look at them and see them for who they are. And I mean, the reality is everybody isn't like redeemable. They're not all the best people. And you're going to have personality clashes. Just because you come from the same parent doesn't mean that your personalities won't clash.
And that's where acceptance can come in too. Because see, part of this stuff that we're talking about, you need to accept your family dynamic. You need to accept how people are so that you're able to build community, develop your own traditions, interact with family in a healthy way, set boundaries, and not feel bad about it.
Yeah. When you accept, like, this is the role, this is how my family sees me. There's some work you can do to kind of, change the way that you present, but it doesn't always change the way that they see you or they
And we can't
interpret you.
control that part either.
Yeah. And that's the acceptance piece, right? It's just like, this is the way it is. Not feeling defeated by that, because that's not by any means a defeatist way of thinking. It's just very realistic. You know, here's the reality too. If Big Mama is 78, how much changing do we think is going to occur?
However, it's 2024 going on 2025. Again, it's a lot of information out here. There's therapy. It's a lot of stuff that can kind of help you move forward, identify the things that you need to change.
Exactly. But they're going to have to want to do it, right? And so we're in a space where we're just like, okay, like these things are occurring. What do I need to do so I'm not having a full-fledged panic attack walking into this house? You know, is it a space where maybe you go a little earlier? I've done that before, where it's just like, oh, because you know, holidays people come in shifts.
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's true.
So, you know, if they say, oh, the food's not going to be ready till 2:00, you can eat anywhere. Come past, hug some folks, see some folks. You know that cousin that get on your nerves usually come late with the alcohol.
That's a good strategy. Just,
come early.
Use your time. That's a good strategy.
Yeah, come early. See the elders a little early, because you know they already up.
Yeah, they'll be there.
They already up. They didn't pick at the turkey a little bit. They didn't have a little pre-plate. They have. So come
ham, go ahead.
Girl, they didn't already picked at the ham already. So just even giving yourself those spaces of grace, you know, also not feeling, because you talked about working on the holiday as well. You know what I mean? Like, so that's something that we have to incorporate too. Some people have 365-day a year jobs that are always open. So you work for the hospitals and things like that. I remember when I first started working at a group home, and my aunt was just like, well, why are you working today? Well, because it's a group home and it's still open. I don't work for the school system, because she worked for the school system. So they had, you know, you got structured holidays. So I don't work for the school system. You know, she's like, well, why? Everything should be. No, everything's not closed. I don't work at the grocery store. I don't work at those places that are closed. I work for something where it's open. So that was like one of the first times, because I worked second shift too. So I started doing things maybe like, I think the day before, but I would come and grab a plate a little bit earlier. It was a little different, but I had to start thinking of things like that, like, okay, you know, so for some people they're working, they're not always available. So this is an empowerment piece for you to kind of figure out how available are you, physically, emotionally, mentally.
But people that work should also be trying to rest. They should be trying to schedule things, to where it works for them. Not work, then feel obligated to do all these other activities.
I gotta overextend
arrangements.
Yeah. Feeling like you gotta overextend yourself and be there all day. Or I saw somebody last year where it was like their Thanksgiving and Christmas stuff didn't start till like 7-8 o'clock at night. I was like, that's interesting.
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea for people who kind of work during the day, and then they can do it at night. But then I'm like, whew, I know if that was my family, I'd miss everything, because I ain't. But they kind of scheduled it around
the majority of families. You would,
yeah. They scheduled theirs around football, so it was like food was going to be done once all the games came on. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. So just creating your own traditions.
And that's what I mean when I say create your own activities, your own traditions, developing your own thing that makes you happy, and more than anything, what brings you peace, what is going to bring you peace.
Yeah. I remember, excuse me, when I was married, we we started entertaining at our house because I got stressed out house hopping.
Mm-hmm.
I got stressed out. I was just like, I there was a part that was kind of fun, but then when my oldest came along, it was like it was too much to get up and tote him around all day when he was kind of
Mm-hmm.
over it, and then you're collecting all these gifts. I was like, why don't everybody just
And
come to
plates and plates, because
every,
people do that too. They collect plates.
you got all these plates, and then you out all day. I said this was cool when we were younger with no kids,
Mm-hmm.
but then it just became a lot. So I remember saying, let's, because then it was like I had to go to my aunt's, then we had his family, and then we had this. It was like, and it was like some friends and stuff. So I was like, what if we just have everybody just come to us? They can bring whatever they want to bring. I'm gonna cook some stuff, and then because the idea was like, then my oldest, he was like super young at the time. I said he could just sit at the house in his pajamas all day
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of chill out. Well, it became a thing for like years. Like that was the thing. It was like, so people would drop in all day long, like just in shifts. So food would be done kind of the night before, and I would just put stuff out in shifts, and we'd have
Mm-hmm.
to go plates. And so the single folks would kind of come through a little bit later, but some of the older folks would come through a little earlier. Bring all the gifts. We're going to do, some gifts over here. And
Mm-hmm.
we actually did Christmas. We would do a big Christmas Eve party. So then
Okay.
on Christmas, nobody had to cook. There would be a little pot of something, but there's no big stuff on Christmas. You
Mm-hmm.
bring the kids over to grandma's house, you open the gifts over there, and you go sit down on Christmas.
Right.
Because I was like, we got 2 birthdays right at Christmas, Christmas Eve, you got New Year's. I'm not doing all this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's too much. So we had to kind of morph our own thing. When I got divorced, I realized that I was very much matriarch because people were looking forward to it being at my house. And the moment I stopped, folks were like, well, where are we going to eat?
They had to reorganize.
They had to reorganize. They had to reorganize. And I haven't done a big holiday anything in, it's got to be over 10 years. And they're still
Mm-hmm.
asking. They're still like, so you still not going to cook anything? You still not going to, no, come to your house and come get a plate.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm gonna do. No, I'm not making a pie. They're like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember my nephew said, do you remember any of the recipes?
Oh
I do.
wow.
He's like, you just don't cook no more. I don't. I'll do it at my leisure. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do it and feel so obligated to.
And that's the part that I encourage people to take out. Take out that feeling of obligation. Because
Yeah.
once you remove that, you can kind of like flow the way you want. You can go where you want to go. You can do things how you want to do it. It makes it so
Mm-hmm.
much easier when you take out guilt, obligation. Um, yeah.
I used to think that rush, that push was part of the holiday.
Hmm.
That push to have 3 cakes and have them in the refrigerator outside in the garage just waiting. Or, we got the meat marinated, so now I got to wake up at 4 a.m. and put that in the oven and have that turkey just cooking all day.
Mm-mm.
Like, I used to
Mm-mm.
think like there was something, and it's like, no, that's just kind of the way it was. I don't feel like, not with the life that I have, not with the work that I have, not with
Right.
the way that things look, like that doesn't fit what I need it to be,
Hmm.
So I had to just kind of rethink that. And that pause was necessary for me because I'm gonna overdo it every time.
Hmm. It might be the Libra in you.
That, yeah, that Libra rising is like, I gotta put out a whole spread. I mean, down to having the tiered plate
Really
server
Martha
with the
Stewartish. Mm-hmm.
oh, it was complete Martha Stewart. I mean, I was like, oh, I gotta have this, and you got the little light bites and
Mm-hmm.
like pans and pans and stuff, and I mean, people came and ate it all. There's no lie. So I cooked a lot, but people came and ate it all. But then I was just like, I'm exhausted by the
Mm-hmm.
end of the holiday, and I don't feel like, you know, in those TV shows where they're like, oh, I'm exhausted, but everybody's happy. I didn't like that. I don't want to be exhausted, but everybody's happy.
Right.
And so just kind of looking at like, how do you reduce that stress for yourself,
Yeah.
you know, based on what it is that you need. What do I need for the holiday? What works for me? And just, you know, if you have partners in that, whether it's, you know, being married or family partners, you know, siblings and stuff, if big mama and big daddy can't
Mm-hmm.
handle it anymore, it's like, okay, what sister's house are we going to have it at? Can we rotate? Like, start to
Right.
put it in there so everybody is taking a piece, and whatever takes off and everybody's more comfortable with, everybody just kind of agree with that to kind of take that stress off.
Right. And if you're the family organizer, um,
Oof.
have reservations. You know, y'all can go make, dinner reservations somewhere. Y'all can go out to eat as a family.
I love a
It
good dinner
doesn't have
reservation.
it doesn't have to be all on one person or one family, to host a dinner. Schedule a dinner somewhere. See what's going to be open. See what's going to be open the day before. Might not be open on that holiday, but see what's going to be open the day before. Make that holiday like just a chill day.
And things are open on the holidays these days. Like there are restaurants open. I learned
Mm-hmm.
that year that I went out of town, because a lot of the bars or like those kind of restaurants open. The hotels are open too, because
Mm-hmm.
people travel and everything, but they're just open later in the day. And you have
Right.
to make a reservation for a lot of those places to be able to, especially the hotels. You got to make a reservation to because they have to account for the amount of food. But
Mm-hmm.
the bars and stuff like that, like, I mean, it's bar food, but it's open because people come to watch football. They've eaten everything they want to eat during the
Right.
day. Now they want to come watch sports.
Right.
Um,
My family love a good family get together at the restaurant. That's what
I
we do.
like it.
We
Nobody has
like
to
to get
clean
together.
up.
Nobody.
Nobody has to clean up. Everybody's good. You pick somewhere where everybody's gonna eat. Like, let the work be somewhere else, and then you can go home and rest
Mm-hmm.
that
And
evening
be happy like
and
everybody
be
else.
happy. Mm-hmm.
Go home with your gift. Y'all can exchange gifts there. If you
Yep.
reserve like a section of the restaurant.
Something super, super easy for
Mm-hmm.
yourselves that everybody agrees on. So let's talk, because timing wise, let's talk just a little bit about, because we have to insert the election in
Oh
here
man.
in this space, because November 5th, lots of stuff going
Mm-hmm.
on. And I know that the energy surrounding that is going to add to what we're already preparing to endure for the holiday.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking specifics with politics, but just how to decompress, um, how to protect your energy as well, surrounding
Mm-hmm.
just all these concepts and things that are going on post-election.
Right. And I think that's extremely important. First, just accept how you feel. Like if you're disappointed, if you're disappointed, it's okay to be disappointed. You know, we are in what? We're Saturday now after the election.
Yeah.
There are some people who are still on pins and needles about what's gonna happen next. But definitely some grounding, meditation, definitely peace, things that bring us peace. Um, it's okay. That's what I would say. It's okay. It's going to be okay. That's the encouragement that I would like to offer. It's gonna be okay. There are, we're gonna be okay.
We're going to have to work something out. Something going to work out.
You
It's
know,
just,
we need to look.
just
We need
even.
community. We need to get together. We need to organize.
Mhm.
We need to be preparing. We need to, amp up maybe some of our side hustles. We gonna be okay.
Yeah,
I
just
mean, it's gonna
like
be a shit show, but
evoking that resilience at some point
mm,
in time, and just even like this may be the time where you're not on social media as much, or
yeah,
you
reduce your
decrease the
time
amount
on
that you're
social media.
watching the news.
Hmm.
Um, find it. This is a good time for creatives too. Like, what is your creative your output? Do you need
Yes,
to write
channel
about
that
it?
energy into an
You know,
outlet. Yeah.
do you need to paint? Are you exercising more? So just finding
And I
whatever that
think
is for
that's
you.
important. The exercise, when you said that, that kind of like triggered in my mind the importance of not getting to a place where we're kind of like paralyzed. Don't
Mm,
stop. You kind of got to keep going. You kind of got to keep going, every day. This is the time to do the exercise, drink the water, take your vitamins. Um, like you said, reduce time looking at the news, social media. This is the time for all of those things that will actually make you feel good.
yeah. Just even a little escapism is okay for just a period of time. We're not talking escape and we just block everything out. But
Hmm.
like this is because you talked in the beginning a bit about grief, and grieving people kind of put us in this space where you feel like first of all, people don't realize how many things you can grieve over. It's not
Right.
just death.
Food
There's
stuff.
all different kinds of perceptions of loss,
Hmm.
so
Friendships, relationships, disappointment
mhm.
of maybe what could have been.
Yeah, like I posted on a friend's thing. I said it's not that I lost hope, it's that my hope was deflated.
Hmm.
So there's a space where you have to grieve there because you put so much energy into one thing and
And
it
hope.
went another way, so you have to just kind of grieve the loss of your perception of how that was going to go. um
And especially for Black women, I think there's a lot more that kind of has to be like processed like on the back end, up under, all that hope and, being let down. There's just
yeah,
other stuff that has to be processed. So with that, definitely like some free writing, journaling, talking to people that you can trust, people that have your back, people that share the same interests as you, talk to other people. Again, develop that support that you need or get that support that you need during that time.
and
This
just
time.
acknowledging that it's a thing, like this
Mhm.
isn't something fabricated, or it's not too much. Excuse me,
But
it's
a
not
lot of
a
us know it's a thing, and so
right.
we can reach out and we can talk to each other. I think that is the positive that will or that is already coming out of this is that we do see certain groups, we do see Black women kind of already like just, you know, embracing each other and supporting each
Yeah,
other.
and just even just giving that pause, like I think some people also went into like work mode. It's like, okay, activism wise, like what needs to be done. So a certain
Mm-mm.
portion of this, like we even need to survey the land and
Hmm.
sit still for a second, like
Hmm.
because
Like
there's
right now, like
there's
how? You don't even know what needs to be fixed right now. So how?
yep. And some of it may not need to be fixed. Some of it may need to just be how it is,
Hmm.
because you don't know how all the chips are going to fall.
Accept
You
it
don't
for right
know
now.
exactly what's going where. It's just,
Hmm.
it's something in you that's like, oh, like goes into action mode. That's like, oh, this needs to be addressed.
For natural fixers, for people that are
Yeah,
natural fixers.
yeah. And
And
just
this
folks
is
in
a time,
general that are just
yeah.
like, because I have some white friends that, that they were just like, oh no, this didn't work out the way it was supposed to work. Like, what are we supposed to do? The people who had a certain amount of hope in one direction are just like,
Mm-hmm.
where does this go? And I just know that a lot of this is going to compound, because once that anxiety gets into you, once that stress gets into you, then it's like as the next thing comes, it just compounds and it just stacks on top of each other. So you have this election, and then everything is heightened now, right? And then we're going to go into Thanksgiving where things were already heightened. It's just going to keep rolling,
And
because
it's
then
just really building up to January. It's just
mhm,
it'll just build. Mm-hmm.
it's just going to keep building, right? So just even giving yourself grace to do some of the free
Mm-hmm.
writing. I'm going to put some activities up on Healing Through Sacred Writing, so people can just kind of have like a writer sandbox there and be able to kind of get some structure. Because some of the things I'm getting from people is like, I don't even know what I feel. I don't know what to think. I don't know what's on my heart. And just sometimes having somebody kind of guide you there to say like, hey, let me
Mm-hmm.
kind of tap this here, start writing here,
Right. And starting
maybe
with,
help.
what were your expectations? What were the
Mm-hmm.
hopes around those expectations? What was the most disappointing or stressful part of, the outcome? What do you
Yeah,
believe is going to be, the worst part? Because then that sets us up to tackle our perception and how we're looking at things.
yeah, for sure. Because it's difficult. And then you're going into, some of this has sparked ideas about the economy, which,
Mm-hmm.
economy, healthcare, it's open enrollment now.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
More
all of these
stress.
things are coming together, where
More
people are like,
stress.
well, it's open enrollment now. Am I going to be able to keep my stuff as of January? So it's like everything is
Mm-hmm.
coming together. So and what this is timely that we decided to do this now, because we talked about a couple days. It's like, oh, like when would we be able to hop on and do this? And then I was like, oh no, we have to throw this election piece
Right.
in there, because it's going to be so much happening mentally for people straight up through
Mhm.
the holidays all the way up into the election. And it's not that it ends with the election, but it's just
Mhm.
like
Right,
they,
and this is the time to process, take care of ourselves, so that we're able to do the practical things that we know we need to do. So, for
yeah,
example, number one, budgeting. We know we need to look at our budgets. We know we need to look at resources. I mean, it's just that's where we're going.
things that we should do anyway, but this is like
Mhm.
being intentional. I think
Very
that's
intentional
probably the big thing, is like
and not
making
waiting.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
waiting.
yeah, just being
That's
like
how this
super
is different.
intentional. Yeah,
Being
that's
proactive.
mm-hmm. And versus the reactive, which is where a
Which is
lot of
what we're
people
used
come
to.
to us. Like, they're on the reactive end, and then they book an appointment.
Mhm. That's what we used to, being
Yeah.
reactive.
So I want you to give everybody your contact information, best way to contact you. And just because you do some private practice, talk to us a little bit about specifics, because I've had friends who were looking for therapists in private practice, but
Mhm.
having just feeling overwhelmed with when they log on, like, how do I choose a therapist, how do I do this, like, how do I look into
Yeah.
that? So just kind of give us a little bit of that, like a guidance in that respect before we wrap up.
Yeah, so finding a therapist, everybody talks about, oh, you need a therapist, you can find a therapist. And I think the conversations that aren't being had is how difficult it can be to find a therapist. And
Yeah,
not only that, taking it a step further, what therapist are you going to mesh with? What therapist are you going to get along with? What therapist are you going to be able to build trust with? Because we know that therapeutic rapport is important, right? Looking at once again, this is one of those things kind of going back to what we just talked about government. Looking at your insurance. Is there a mental health component to your insurance? Do you have that type of coverage where you can get counseling through your insurance. If you
Yeah.
don't, there are platforms like BetterHelp, and I know there's a couple of others. I myself, I'm on BetterHelp in the evenings, so I have a lot of evening and weekend availability on BetterHelp. Um, as far as insurance, my platform is called Headway, and so insurance like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, um, I want to say even like Medicare more recently for
Okay.
LPCs in Georgia. And those are the kind of conversations that we just have to have, that we kind of have to look at. I know Aetna does this thing that's like with CVS, that's like the minute, it's a part of their like their minute clinic thing, where
Okay.
you can find a counselor through there. So if you're going through your job, if you work a full-time job that has benefits, they may have an employee assistance program. That's another way you can go about therapy, is looking into your EAP at your job, seeing if they have an EAP program, and that will allow you a certain amount of sessions for free counseling.
Okay.
So
And
there are
that's
different
good to
ways
know.
that I think that we just don't think about. Like we just don't think sometimes like outside the box about how to talk to someone.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of times by the time people have resolved that that's what they want to do, we're already in reactive
Mhm.
mode, which makes it harder for us to kind of choose or sift through some of the choices.
Mhm.
For you, what is your niche? Because that's something that I think people don't widely understand as well, is that like we don't operate like a general practitioner doctor. We all have like specific things that we
Certain
kind of,
specialties.
yes, focus on as a specialty.
All right. So one of my areas that I absolutely love is cultural competence. We live in the US where, they had to, what, I want to say the 90s. When did they do cultural competence? When did they make that a requirement?
That was like late 80s, early
80s?
90s.
Yeah. And so basically they had to kind of develop, that thing where they said where it's important that, we be able to treat people of different ethnic backgrounds, races, cultures, right? But I do love that. That's one of, my niches, spirituality, talking to people who have or experience some confusion sometimes, people who maybe have difficulty going, maybe who are thinking about maybe leaving Christianity,
Mm,
and doing something different, but not quite sure like what or where they're going. I love to work with everybody, but I consider myself really excited when I see people like that look like me in therapy. I love to work with Black people in therapy. Sometimes it can even be fun. And I would also say every therapist is different. Me, I have more of a laid back approach, but that is because we spend so much of our everyday lives being consumed in like this professionalism, or having to be, in these certain roles at our jobs and at home. And in therapy, we need to be able to let our hair down. We need to be able to um, talk the way we want to talk and say things the way we want to say it. We need to be able to be comfortable.
I like that.
Hmm.
That's good to know. And it's because I just know for some folks it's kind of difficult, and I've heard people say, well, oh, I didn't really mesh with my therapist, so this really didn't work. I mean, everybody doesn't get along. That's number one. But then
Mhm,
also make sure that you're choosing a therapist based on what your needs are. So,
mhm,
like, if you're going for anxiety, depression, like, make sure that your therapist kind of lists that. A lot of times when
mhm,
you're looking on the websites and stuff, they list what their specialties are. So make sure
mhm,
that that is a specialty that they have listed. Some do very specific work with trauma. Some
mhm.
do very specific work with, I've seen work with like caregiver
Right.
stress.
Right.
So that's like a very specific space.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that if there's something super specific, like some do stress management, you want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that you're kind of choosing based
Mm-hmm.
on that.
And there are
So,
so many different specialties in, like, for example, I love anger management, stuff,
mhm,
grief therapy, just so many different things, cognitive behavior therapy, DBT, trauma therapy. So it's a lot.
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on to chat with me today. Make sure you give them
You're
your
welcome.
Instagram as well.
All right. So on Instagram, I am the Hoodoo Therapist.
Thank you so much. So, thank you for joining. Everybody that joined live, I really appreciate y'all. Oh, thank you, Nakia. She said, great information, ladies. Thank you so much for joining live. This is
Mhm.
going to restream on my YouTube channel. So you guys can go back there and check it out if you weren't able to check it out live. And we will be back. I think next week with another episode because we're going to be continuing to talk about just how we can navigate all of these times in the
Mhm.
holiday corridor and just some tips and things just so you guys know that you're not alone. People ask me all the time, they'll come and be like, this is gonna sound crazy. There are no crazy questions,
Mm-mm.
and most of it does not sound crazy, and
Mm-mm.
a lot of it is stuff that we need to talk about.
Mhm.
So that's what the platform of Mental Health Matters is about, and that's why we're here. So if you've
Excellent.
joined, make sure you share the content if it's something that really resonated with you, and make sure to follow Brittany on all of her social media and everything as well, and chat with her. Let her know how she did on the show if you have any other questions. But thank you guys for joining today. Thank you, Brittany.
All right. You're welcome. Good talking to you.